From one brilliant game director to the next one. The list goes on and on today, and I am truly filled with excitement and joy just watching all these great talks. Next up is first famous for the amazing horror game called Until Dawn. Recently been working on a anthology, which would be the topic of the talk today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Tom Heaton from Supermassive. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Jacob. How are you?
I'm really happy that you're here. I need to turn up the volume on my little mic here. Here, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine, yeah.
Very good. Nice to meet you, Tom. And I'm so happy that we managed to make it work. I'm not going to waste any more time. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm hoping to see a PowerPoint. There we go, great. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for having me at the Nordic Games Conference. I'm going to talk today about narrative and choice in the Dark Pictures Anthology, because those are the two things that are really at the heart of what we do at Supermassive. So first of all, let's do a quick recap. I'm not going to spend long on this because I'm assuming you kind of know what it is or what the Dark Pictures Anthology is. So it is a series of games. They're all standalone titles. They're all horror, and they've all got this kind of cinematic presentation. So it's a bit like you watching a horror film is the idea, but you're playing a game, and they feature narratives that the player can influence in a lot of ways. They are real, and we'll see some of this in a minute. They're huge, branching narratives. They're multi-platform and they're multiplayer, which I'm not really going to talk too much about today. But you can play with a friend, or you can sit down and play with 5 people locally, and that's one of the things that people really like about them is sharing that narrative. So that's what the anthology is. That's what we've done so far. We've done Man of Medan. I was the game director on Man of Medan. That's why I've got the T-shirt, and that's why I'm doing the talk. We've also published Little Hope, which went down really well. And we have got a game in development called House of Ashes, which we are going to be talking about very shortly. I'll just give you a quick kind of recap of the gameplay. So, yeah, they're films. They're films that you can play. They're films that are games. There's 3 kind of modes that you have in the Dark Pictures. One is exploration. You can explore environments. You've got control of the character. You can kind of find stuff and pick stuff up and use it. And that's a very conventional game mode. One is drama. That is you control these characters. They all have kind of intense relationships with each other. They're in a situation of a lot of stress usually because it's a horror game. And you control the drama. There might be discussions about what they're going to do next, or kind of scenes where the plot moves on, and you drive that with choice. And the third mode is action. That's kind of high impact combat, QTEs, life and death stuff. Mixed in with that, we've got things you can find in the world, secrets. You can find a kind of true story of what's going on and hints about what to do. And finally, there's a relationship structure based on the people that you're playing, how they get on with each other, and that kind of dictates the flow of the game as well. So that's that at a very high level. If you haven't played the games, then I recommend you do because you'll get a better understanding of it. But if you have played them, that should all be familiar, and you can kind of think, yeah, that's what I understood as I was getting with the Dark Pictures title. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to talk about how we go about creating a strong narrative. Narrative is really important to us. It's at the heart of all the games, and we don't want to use what I would call a conventional game narrative, which tend to be quite light on the narrative. We want a narrative that is more familiar from film or a TV series, which has a great plot and great characters. And which it can be accessible by people that don't necessarily play games. It's about kind of opening up the audience there. So the first thing we do is we start with a script. Actually, we have a writing team. We haven't always done this, but this is a technique we've done for the last couple of games, where we just get our writing group to produce a film script. And they've got, we've usually got an idea at the heart of it, but they've got a lot of free reign. They go and write a script, and that straight off the bat, that gives us a strong narrative, and it gives us a strong set of characters. Now, that script might not survive much into the final game, and in fact, none of the original, it all gets completely rewritten, but even the kind of beats of that script might get ripped out. It's to give us a really good starting point, something really solid that we can build on. After we got the script, we extract the key story beats. Now, you might have seen this image, the 3-act structure. This is the structure that is used for most screenwriting. It comes in a lot of different flavors and formats, and this is just something I found on the internet. This is one version of them, but they all share a certain amount of stuff. For example, there's a clear division between the acts. Act 2 is normally a lot longer than Acts 1 and 3. There's a midpoint right in the middle of the film where something, everything turns around, something really bad happens, often a low point. Often in Act 1, there's some sort of inciting event, a call to arms, and then the hero has to decide whether to go on that journey, which they always do in narratives. And towards the end of Act 2, there's a low point, a crisis. Everything is lowest point. Those are all kind of they're standard. And if you've seen this model and then watch some Hollywood movies, you see it over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with that. That you see it over and over again because it works. It's really good at what it does. So we can't use that. That's a 3-act structure designed for films, but we can draw inspiration from it, and elements of it are useful, and we've got our own kind of version of that. And from that script, we draw out the key story beats. What is the break into Act 2? What is the break into Act 3? Which of these things is the midpoint? And so on. We're kind of breaking the story down into its component parts. Then we develop a branching structure. So obviously a Hollywood film is a linear experience. It doesn't have a branching structure. This is where we start to do our own thing. And this is a high level branching structure at this point. It's things like, what if this person has died? What if they decide to go to this area rather than this area? How will our game cope with that? So this is a big picture branching. And it's important to do it now before we get too far into the design of the narrative. Then we develop scenes. So this is pretty high level. This is piece of paper per scene. Say scene is about 10 minutes of gameplay in our games, playing as one character. And again, we're just saying, what is the content of this scene? Who are you playing? What's the motivation? What are they trying to do? What are the obstacles to that? This is a pretty familiar film model of developing narratives. So we've now distilled that script into a load of scenes, following a structure that we think is robust. And next up, we analyze it. We do a bunch of analytics. Are we playing? Are all the characters getting equal screen time, for example? Is there a good mix of exploration, then drama, and then action? And also, it's just a kind of a bit of feel. Does it feel good? Is this a good story that we got here? After that, we do the detail flow. So by detail flow, we're going to see a little bit of this in a minute. It's everything in the game. It's literally everything you think you can do or could possibly do is in a flow chart, a really, really complicated flow chart, and we have to work it all out. This takes ages. This is a very, very long phase. We do it in a tool we've got that allows us to work quickly and stores a load of data. And it also allows us to play the game. So when we make this flow, which looks kind of like what you see on the right, we can also play that game. We'll see that in a minute, so I won't talk too much about that. And that's that phase, the detail flow and the playable. That's where we iterate and just keep making it better and get it to a point where we are ready to go into full production. So our games, they're very upfront. The production is very expensive for us, so we try to get as much right as we possibly can before we go into production. Hence, we can play the whole game. We've seen it all. Let's take a look. So this is our flow tool, and that is the whole of Man of Medan, Acts 1, 2, and 3. And we're diving here into Act 2. That's the structure of Act 2. And you can see even at the scene level, each of those grey boxes are scenes, that it's very complicated and that there is a lot of branching depending on who's alive and who's dead and other things. Now we've gone right into the level of a scene. This is part of what we call Conrad Chase, the bit where Conrad is chased through the ship by the kind of ghost woman. And you see it's very complicated. This is a short section of gameplay. It's about 4 minutes long. Each of those green boxes is a cinematic. So our flows are comprised of very small cinematics. And the orange boxes that you can see over on the left there are choices. Within the flow tool, for each cinematic, we storyboard everything. So this is the storyboards for the Conrad Chase. It's partly because it's very difficult to assess the game just off text. The images do a huge amount, but also it's our initial shooting plan as well. Also in the flow tool, we have the whole script. Scripts written by Hollywood writers. This one written by Graham Resnick, and we see the whole thing from the flow tool. We can edit it, we can change it. The writers work in the flow tool itself. So the flow tool is like our center of operations. It does everything, and we work in it for a long time. And we can play the game. So we started the game. This little window is actually someone playing the game. It plays a little bit slowly because there's a lot of reading to do. But you'll see, and on the left there, you can see just the slides from the final game, just because you can see the comparison of really how close it is. Even QTEs, choices, everything is represented in the flow tool. So we're getting a kind of very lo-fi, but very fully featured version of the game as early as we can. And we play it and we test it on people. Until we're convinced that we have a good game, we have a good narrative, that everything is sorted out before we go into full production. Okay, so that's how we do the narrative. It starts from the script, goes through all those phases to get to something that we can play in a storyboard format. The next thing I want to talk about is choices. So choices are a key selling point of what we're doing. It's a thing that people really associate with the Dark Pictures games and with the studio as a whole. The idea being that you as the player gets to make significant choices which will drive the flow of the story. We've got two types of choice in the Dark Pictures. We call this a directional choice, which is the choices in the world. It's connected to things in the world. Do you want to grab the pistol from the guy, or do you want to distract him? That's a choice that happens within the world. And our second choice is a dialogue choice. It's choosing what to say. And we, as much as we can, which is a lot, we give players all the key decisions in the narrative. Certainly, if you're playing a character, they won't do anything without you making a choice for them to do that. And we deliver consequences based on those choices. That was a decision really early on, that we weren't going to cheat with the choices. That if we asked you to make a choice about something, then it would be used. The game would pay attention to it and reflect that back to you. It might be that it's a really massive thing. It might be that another character's life or death depends on this choice. It might be much less significant. It might be how someone feels about you, or whether you can find a secret or something. But every choice has a consequence. A really important kind of thing for us. And you're playing a movie, yeah. That's the thing we're trying to give you, and it comes from that idea of seeing people watch horror movies and comment on it and talk to the characters. Don't go down there. Watch out, he's behind you. We're trying to give the player that power to say, okay, well, now you can decide where they're going to go in this movie. This is what we're aiming for. The choices, it's very easy to kind of generate a load of choices, but it's very difficult to design a really good choice. We're aiming for choices that are engaging, that make the player think, that are difficult, that put them in a spot that we don't want easy choices, we don't want obvious choices. And a lot about designing choices is context. You can't just throw a choice at the player. You have to make sure they understand some of the repercussions, some of what's, why that choice is being asked, why it's important for that character. So there's a lot of building up before we give you a choice. But players love them. Players love having the choice. They love having that control over the game, at least when we get it right. So choice and now those are the two things that we're offering. We offer a few other things, but that's really at the core of what we do. So it should be a perfect marriage. It should be because players like both those things, but it's not that simple. So what I want to do for the rest of the talk is to look at some of the problems that we've had with that and some of the solutions we've developed. So the first problem is that the classic 3-act structure that delivers good narrative is completely linear. I mean, it's completely linear and always has been. And our games are highly non-linear. So we've already hit a little problem, is that our structure it doesn't work. The second problem is that narrative, when you see a narrative at a cinema or on the TV screen, on Netflix or whatever like that, it tends to have reached its perfect form. By which I mean an army of screenwriters and then the director and all the actors have worked really hard to make that narrative work in the form that you finally see it. And they have, everything is geared towards that. So if you imagine the Matrix, well, imagine the Matrix where Neo takes the blue pill. That's a choice. He takes the blue pill. That film is not good. That film is not a film that you want to see. Imagine Shrek, where Shrek and Fiona don't fall in love. That film is very lessened by that, because those narratives are honed to perfection. That those things have to happen for that narrative to make sense. So that's a problem for us. We'll come to why in a minute. Well, this is the problem. The problem expects control and consequence over that narrative, but the narrative wants to be perfect. So those things are in conflict with each other. What the player's freedom to do things is in conflict with narrative's desire to be really perfect for you. So the player can choose the blue pill and suddenly you've got a rubbish narrative. That's the problem we face. So what are our solutions? Okay, there's a number. One of them is to use B plots. So in movies, a B plot is the secondary plot, and sometimes you have C plots and D plots. We can call them all B plots. They're not the main plot. They may be about the core relationship at the heart of the film. And in fact, B plots are often about relationships. So we have multiple of these going on in our games. And one of the reasons for that is they are more amenable to player choice. They're more amenable to the player controlling them without disturbing the main narrative. So we have a bunch of plots going on, and some the player has more control over some than others. So that's the B plots is one solution. Another solution is to change the texture and the feel of events that have to happen, because otherwise there's no game. So, for example, in Man and Medan, the crew of kids on a diving holiday has to end up on the Man and Medan. That has to happen, because otherwise there is no game. That's the plot of the game. So it's always going to happen, but it can happen in different ways. It can happen with one of the characters having died, or it can happen with one of the characters having escaped and possibly bringing a rescue boat back, or it can happen with neither of those things having happened, or it can happen with a good relationship with your captors or a bad relationship. And all of those things affect the subsequent dialogue and who's in the scene and what they say. So we're really getting the same thing. They arrive on the big ship, but it can feel a little different. And the further you get into the game, the more different it can feel. So we change the texture of stuff that's always going to happen. And then the final one, and the biggest one really, is sometimes we have to say, this key beat can't happen because the player's chosen something else. So we need to create an alternative that also hits hits the requirements of that beat, but does it in a different way, so that the player can steer you towards that one. So we get, potentially a completely different scene, which is also a moment of crisis, or whatever. So that's your big scale branching of, we're actually going to offer something that's very different, and the player's driving it, and that's very satisfying for the player. The other point of conflict with choice and narrative in general is character. So something that people often get very excited about when they join our team. Actually, it's very, very common for people to talk about character arcs for the narrative, and I think it's because character arcs are something that most people have a pretty good awareness of their importance in narrative. And what I say to them, or maybe I say it slightly less nowadays, but what I say is character arcs don't work. I'm afraid that one thing that everyone knows about doesn't work for us, and it doesn't work because, well, the character might be dead for one thing, in which case we haven't got a character arc. They can't complete that character arc. And the other thing is the player won't play ball. The player's doing different things. For example, I mean, character arcs are often about redemption. The character's done something wrong, feels guilty about it, and over the course of the game, or the film, say, they find a way of redeeming themselves, usually in an unexpected way, but also a perfect way, the perfect way for them to redeem that. That's how a character arc normally works. But the player's in control, and they might not send them down that redemption path. They might keep making them act like a bit of an asshole. That's quite a typical player move. So how are we going to get our character arc? We can't redeem this character because the player won't let us. So that's quite a big problem, because then players get frustrated if the characters don't have proper development. So one solution is, okay, there are some character arcs that actually can work. Sometimes the smaller, kind of more symbolic character arcs, they can actually work quite well. So, for example, at the end of the Goonies, the kid throwing away the asthma inhaler, that's a little character arc, and that we could do that if your characters survived. They could do that sort of gesture. The other thing is, we could have narrative character arcs are usually very, very tight. They're very constrained. They're perfect. But we could have looser optional arcs around development where perhaps the character can complete the arc in a number of different places and in a number of different ways. Perhaps it can even be cumulative, but they're still undergoing change. They're still undergoing development. Here's a solution that we tried for a long time, is to have characters at a kind of point in their lives where they could go one of two ways and become one of two different people, depending on what you did in the game, because that sounded like a good idea. I'm crossing it out because I don't do that anymore. It's something that didn't really work, and what we got was behavior that was from the characters that didn't really make sense. They were too split. So that's not a thing I do anymore. Instead, and I think this is the strongest way of dealing with characters and choice, is first of all, we develop a really strong character, and that goes back to our initial script. And then we make that character conflicted. We give them problems that act in opposition to each other. So, for example, Brad in Man and Medan wanted to be brave. That was one of his drivers of his character. He wasn't brave, but he wanted to be brave, and so that was a thing he was pushing towards. Another thing was that he was in loggerheads with his elder brother. He was jealous of his brother, and he wanted to get out of his brother's shadow. Now, sometimes those two things acted together, but sometimes they were in opposition. And when they were in opposition, that's where we could put a choice. So we could say, do you want to be brave Brad, or do you want to be Brad that's working things out with this brother? And that gave us good choices. So that's how we that's one of the ways we've resolved that. It's a kind of ongoing, all these things are ongoing problems because they're very difficult. So that's it, really. It's a kind of bit of a whistle-stop tour of narrative and choice in the Dark Pictures. To sum it up, people really love cinematic narratives. They love sharing them with people that aren't usually gamers. So it's very common for us to, I'll flick through these. So they love to choose it, but they love to sit with families or friends and play together and comment on it and talk about it. So that's why the cinematic narratives really drive that, because non-gamers can really understand that, and they can contribute. Even if they're not controlling characters, they can contribute a lot to the game. choice and narrative, they do really work together. They want to be together. It's a very compelling idea, but it's like I said, it's like a marriage. But it's a relationship that you have to work out, like any marriage. There's a significant problems that you have to work out how to overcome, and you have to make compromises. So it's on your original vision to get everything to work. But if you do that, then it works really well, and we can get an experience that people really enjoy. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
So much for this, Tom. Really great talk. I think that we might have had a little bit of a technical problem, not with us, obviously, because it's not our fault, but with our internet provider. I seem to have gotten some comments that you froze a little bit. And
I'm sorry about that.
No, to that, I just want to say that obviously we have recorded this presentation, and it will be available, uploaded tonight in the NG21 library, where you can watch Tom's talk flawlessly. So if it was annoying, I really am sorry. It's kind of a problem that we try to solve, but being in a spaceship and have to deal with stuff down on Earth, it's a little bit tricky, but we will solve it. And Tom, are you available for a little bit of a Q&A on the Discord?
Yeah, I'll try to be if I can set it up here.
Okay, thank you so much, Tom, for this, and many thanks for your presentation, and I wish you all the best of luck in the future with your great games.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And that concluded yet another great talk in the NG21 May Day 2 program. We'll take a short break and then we will be back with more.